Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Hope you all are doing well. Today we are going to discuss figurative language or figures of speech. If you are from literature background or if you've done a literature course like prose or poetry, so this will be very easy for you. But even if you haven't, then don't worry because we won't be going into too much depth in these figures of speech. There are going to be a lot of terms, but that's just that, a lot of terms. If you understand them and are able to apply them, which I will help make sure you do, then there's nothing to worry about. So it may at first seem a bit too difficult, but then it's actually easy. So let's get started. A very minimalist slide, right? I've actually made this on purpose. So the definition is also very minimalistic. So it's just that figurative language is non-literal language. We actually say a lot of things that we don't literally mean. For example, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Or don't ask too many questions, my head is exploding. Just like this picture. So when we talk about figurative language, we don't just talk about what we ourselves say on a daily basis, even though we also say this. And yes, we also may say some figures of speech, but we are talking about what writers and poets, they use sophisticated language. When we go through the slides, you will realize that I've categorized the figures of speech into three broad categories, and sound is the first one. So let's talk about the figures of speech which relate to sound: alliteration, consonants, and assonance. First, let's read this sentence. She sells seashells by the seashore. So it's actually a tongue twister. If you attempt to say this out loud multiple times in a row, you will most probably mess up. So when we're talking about sound, we have to think about the pronunciation. So let's actually list this. So she sells. It's the word she has an opening with sh, right? She. And this sells, not shells, but sells. So s. Again, c, not she. S. And this is not sells, but shells. So it's sh. By is just b. It's not going to be relevant. And the we can write as th. C is again S and sure is SH. So when we talk about alliteration, so we are talking about same sounding letters. So it can be either consonants or vowels. We don't have to discriminate. But one thing we have to realize is to keep in mind is that the two words in alliteration should in all likelihood be together. Like she sells. The SH and S don't rhyme, right? We're talking about sounds. Remember, the S rhymes, the S matches, but not the sound. And then we have sells, C. So these two, so sells and C, they are alliteration, right? Not C shells, no, shells by no, by the no, the C no, seashore no. So the only alliteration is sells and C, these two words. When we're talking about consonants, we're talking about same sounding consonants. So the consonants and vowels, you all remember, right? A, E, I, O, U. These 5 letters are vowels and the rest are consonants in the English alphabet. So most of these letters are consonants, right? Like only E, A, these are vowels. So here she sells, C shells. Again, sells and C. It's an alliteration, example of alliteration, and it's also an example of consonants. Why? Because the sound and the C in sounds, they also rhyme. And also we not only look at the first sounding letters in consonants, we also look at sounds that occur in between the words. For example, she sells, there's an L sound, right? Sells. And there's also shells, right? So these two words, even though they are not directly side by side, just one word in between, these two words also compose a consonants. And then when we talk about assonance, we're talking about vowels. Okay, so vowels E, A, I, O, U. So she has the sound E, right? And sells is like A, like sells, bells, tells, A sound. C, again E. So she and C. even though there's a word in between, still they constitute assonance. So again, sea shells, cells and shells, right? E sound. And by the no, seashore no. So she. You can drag this here, but there's no need, just these two assonances. So to continue, there is one more figure of speech that you're going to learn at the moment, which is onomatopoeia. So this, you may have already heard of this. Onomatopoeia refers to words which are pronounced the same way as they actually sound in real life. Okay, so for example, a cat meows, okay, a dog barks, and a snake hisses, right? And it's not only animal sounds but also splash, vroom, bam, bang, zap, crash. So all these words are onomatopoeic words. And a funny thing and interesting thing is that it differs across cultures. So for example, we say a dog barks, right? But in Bangla it's called like dog, kukur gheo gheo korche, right? And a frog, what does a frog do? It croaks, right? C-R-O-K-S, croaks. But in Japanese it's called keru keru, and even the frog itself, it is called a keru or something like that, but the word keru is there because to them it sounds more like keru than croak. Interesting, right? Let's now move on to the second broad category, which is comparison. So similes and metaphors are very easy. So in similes we have comparisons which are made with the words as or like in the sentence. Okay, so she is as sweet as a flower, she is as lovely as a rose, the boy is as strong as an ox. Or you can use like, she is sweet like a flower, he is strong like an ox. And as for metaphors, these are direct comparisons which are made without using the words like as or like. For example, a writer or anybody can directly say that she is a flower. Of course, she is a flower is most probably not literally true unless you're talking about a flower in the female gender, but these are more metaphoric, pun intended, right? So next comes symbolisms. So symbolisms or symbols are words which have deep associative meaning with an object. Okay, so it's got to be a deep established meaning with an object. For example, birds. When we talk about birds, or in a story when a bird appears in the scene, so that may indicate freedom, or maybe wings, like you've heard of the phrase wings of freedom, right? So when there's a line or a sentence about wings, you may read between the lines that the writer or the poet is hinting at freedom in this scene. So, and we all know that black and darkness, they connote evil, and white light, and the light as opposed to darkness, it connotes virtue, and red signals danger, right? So someone is wearing a red dress, a red top, or something red appears in the scene, then that's a harbinger of danger, right? When we talk about juxtaposition, we are talking about two things put side by side together to bring out the differences, or it may be even similarities between the two. So when we juxtapose things, when a writer juxtaposes, for example, things that happen in the day, and then in the very next paragraph or in the very next chapter, or maybe even not in the very next, but then later on, a scene at night, then he or she is doing juxtaposition. So we can parallel those things and we may draw contrasts. So another example could be that a writer in chapter 1, he is describing the events that happened in a lighthouse 5 years ago, and then in the very last chapter of the novel he is talking about the same setting, the lighthouse, but that's when everybody's grown up in the present. Okay, it may not be 5 years ago, but maybe 10 years to make the differences come to light even more. So that's juxtaposition. So when a juxtaposition is completely oppositional, like day and night, that sort of differences, so that may also be a juxtaposition, or it may be very similar. So that's also juxtaposition to bring out the fact that people don't change, or maybe things haven't changed that much. So juxtaposition doesn't always have to be paradoxical. Okay. So when we talk about irony, there are three types, like dramatic irony, situational irony, verbal irony. So dramatic irony is when, for example, the characters in a play or in a story know something, don't know something, but we the audience know that an event has transpired. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, we know of the death, but they don't know. So that's dramatic irony. And in situational irony is a situation which you normally wouldn't assume to have happened, but it actually has happened. For example, someone might be a vegan, and he may have preached to others, or at least encouraged others to be vegan, but he is now not only having milk but also animals meat. Okay, so that's a situational irony. And verbal irony is in speech, when there's irony in dialogue. Remember, in Delight in Disorder, in that discussion, we talked about oxymorons. So oxymorons are two words which are used together with no other words in between. So they have to be together, like big baby, open secret, passive aggressive, original copy. So why are they oxymorons? That's because normally when we think of a baby, it's very small, right? It's 1 year old or less, 6 months, 3 months, newborn. So they are not normally big, so but still it makes sense. And secrets are normally closed, right? But there is such a thing as an open secret, and same with passive aggressive and all these. So, and what's the difference between that and a paradox? So paradox is normally longer than an oxymoron. So examples of paradox could be that it's the beginning of the end. So beginning and end, they don't fit together, but it's surely a paradox. And then another example could be deep down, you're really shallow. So deep down and shallow. So the word shallow means not at the surface level, right? But that's just the literal meaning. So when we think about it deeply, no pun intended, so that actually makes sense. So another example could be that we save money by spending it, by, for example, investing it, right? So those are paradoxes, and they have space in between the keywords. First of all, there is personification. So by the name itself, personify. So we get the idea that personification is when we give human qualities to non-human objects or non-human entities, to inanimate objects, right? So the leaves danced on the wind. So obviously the leaves do not any leaves, no leaves dance on their own, right? But by writing this sentence, the writer is referring to the motion of the leaves, that because of the wind the leaves were moving so much and in such a way that it seemed like they were dancing. So same with the angry sore was visible. So of course, as sore on a person's body, it cannot be angry, right? But possibly that the sore was giving the person who has the sore so much pain that he or she called it angry. Makes sense? So apostrophe is a subcategory of personification, and it's an extreme version of personification. It's when we not only give human qualities to something which is not human, but we actually address it directly. For example, where in this sentence, don't tell me now, dear eyes. So the person is addressing the dear eyes of someone, maybe himself or herself, we don't know, but he or she is addressing eyes. So obviously eyes cannot reply back. And the next example, life, I cannot understand you. So obviously it's just a gesture of frustration. When someone is maybe frustrated with his or her life, he or she may say, oh, I do not understand you, life. Or maybe when we hit our hand or our foot on a bench, we say, "Damn it, bench, why did you have to do that?" So that's apostrophe. Hyperbole refers to exaggerations. So when we say things to a greater extent than what literally happens, to a greater degree, then it's called a hyperbole. For example, we all say this: "I'm dying of hunger, I could eat a horse right now, I've waited a million years for this, you've been waiting forever." So those are hyperbole. And understatement is the exact opposite of that. So it's when we downplay things. For example, here A is saying, "Hey, how do you feel a day now after surgery?" And B says, "Not so bad. I'm not screaming in pain now after all." So obviously B is not just doing not so bad, he or she must be doing a lot worse, because he or she was screaming in pain a while ago, because it was just a day after that A asked. So you may ask that, isn't that sarcasm? I say no, because B says not so bad. Sarcasm would have been something like B saying, "Oh, I feel wonderful. I'm not screaming in pain now after all." So rather than that, B just said he or she is not feeling so bad. So that's downplaying, and that's an understatement. So coming to euphemism. Euphemism refers to using words and phrases which are socially appropriate and sensitive. And so for example, saying he farted, he or she farted would be insensitive, right? And it would not be formal. So rather than that, we say passing gas. Same way, rather than saying he is dead or he died, we say he is no more. And there are a lot of other examples. For example, we say pickpocket rather than thief. Next we have imagery. So imagery refers to the words and phrases and the writing style of a writer, of a good writer or a good poet, to how they evoke our senses. So we have 5 senses: sense of sight, sense of hearing, taste, smell, and feel. So a good writer, a proficient writer, will actually write in such mastery of language that they make us feel these the things that they write. For example, look at this sentence: "The tiny red ant climbed up the broken twig." When we read this sentence, we not only get the content that an ant was climbing on a twig, but we also see the descriptions that the ant was tiny, red, and what it climbed was not only a twig, but it was broken. So this sentence evokes in our mind our sensory our sight sense, right? So it evokes our senses. So it's, even though imagery, you may think that images refer to things that we can see, images can only be visual, but actually, as I said earlier, we have 5 senses, and good writers can evoke to all 5 our senses. For example, take a look at this sentence: "One bite of the sour lemon caused my lips to pucker." So by reading this sentence, a good reader, someone who pays attention, may also feel the sourness of the lemon, like, by reading this sentence, as if he or she is vicariously living through the characters in the story. Puns are very interesting. So a pun refers to a play of words. For example, "I was struggling to figure out how lightning works, but then it struck me." So of course, struck has a connection with lightning. So we say the lightning strikes, right? That lightning doesn't strike twice. There's a saying like that. So the pun works that way. Another example is, "I've been to the dentist many times, so I know the drill." So of course, drill and dentist, these 2 words have a connection, because one of the tools that the dentist uses is a drill, as it's shown in the picture. But here the drill refers to something else, right? So I know the drill, that means that I know what happens commonly. But here it's used as a play of words with the word dentist, which was used prior. Interesting, right? We come to the last 2 figures of speech that we will be studying, and I am warning you guys to pay very close attention, because metonymy and synecdoche are arguably the 2 most confusing figures of speech to pinpoint. So metonymy represents something that it is not always physically connected with. So for example, when we say the crown has made this decision, we mean that actually the king has made the decision, because the crown is an inanimate object. It has no life, it cannot move on its own. Of course, it has no decision making capabilities, so we mean that the king has made the decision. Of course, kings wear crowns, but they don't always have to wear crowns. It is just a representation. The crown has become synonymous with kings, so it can be used as a metonymy for king. Same with pen and sword. For example, the saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. We mean that knowledge is mightier or more beneficial than violence, right? So coming on to synecdoche, when we say give me a head count of the class or of the room, we do not necessarily ask people to count how many heads are there, right? Of course, every person has one head, so when we count the number of heads, we are actually counting the number of people in the room, right? For example, if the head count is something like 1 2 3 4 5 6 and goes to 20, so the head count is 20. So actually the focus of the question, of the focus of the head count, is actually people count, right? Number of people in the room. So head count doesn't only refer to counting of heads, but the counting of people, of the number of people. Again, when we say something like, wow man, nice wheels, how much did it cost? So we are not actually asking for the price of the wheels, we are asking for the price of the whole car, right? So wheels represent a car or cars, so that's synecdoche. Same with lending someone an ear. When we ask someone to listen to us over the phone, even if it's not physical, or if it's a face-to-face interaction, we ask them to come to us. Or if it's over the phone, it's not physically lending someone, but we're asking them to listen to us for a while. So we are not actually literally asking people to lend an ear, because we do not expect, nor do we want, hopefully, for someone to cut off their ear for you to listen to you, but rather you are asking people to lend themselves to you for a while. Let's do some practice on metonymy and synecdoche. The first one, the White House has made this declaration. So it's similar to the crown and king thing. So the White House represents the presidency, right? It's not directly related to it, but it's a symbol, so it's metonymous. Then the Tigers have won this match, which is a cricket match. So here the Tigers refers to the Bangladeshi cricket team. The Bangladeshi cricket team does not have anything literally to do with tigers, but it's a symbol, right? It's a symbolic thing. So it's metonymous too. Can you give me a hand? So similar to asking someone to lend their ear, we actually mean by hand, we actually mean their whole body. So it's a synecdoche. The chair of the department is looking for you. So the chairman or the chairwoman doesn't have anything literally related to do with a chair, right? It's not intrinsically a part of them. So it's a symbolic thing again, so it's metonymous. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. So I think you've all heard of this saying, that when you are in a foreign culture, in a foreign country, you should adopt that culture, or at least you should accept it, right? So here Rome represents foreign countries. It's not specifically linked to all foreign countries, of course, so it's metonymous. Not all foreign countries are Rome. So finally, all hands on deck, it's a saying in sailor discourse. I think you've also heard of this. So here by all hands, of course it also means things like give me a hand or lend me an ear. Like they're asking people to be of help on the deck. So it's not just referring to hands per se, it's referring to the people's whole body, asking for help. So that's a synecdoche. Hope you've learned from this, and if you need more practice, let me know in the comments. Bye.